Hi to everyone. My name's Kathy Gow. I'm the curator of the Hatfield Historical Museum, and I'm on the board of the Hatfield Historical Society, which manages Hatfield museums for the town of Hatfield. Welcome to tonight's program, which is called Digging Deeper and Separating Fact from Fiction, How to Research Your House. This is the sixth and the final installment of the Historical Society's series of programs, which were all made possible by a grant from Mass Humanities with funding from the Mass Cultural Council. And the grant was designed to help us build a digital volunteer program and to be able to reach a wider group of people than would normally be able to, visit and do work for us on the second floor of Hatfield's library, which is where our museum is located. So we have a new volunteers page on our website made by Meg Baker, who's waving up there. And this is where opportunities will be described, and also where the sign-up form will be listed for both doing transcription work as well as doing historical research. So those sign-up links are there now, and the link for historical research is either for doing research about houses or families or things of that sort. It'll also be the page where we showcase volunteer work as it gets completed. We have some folks who have already signed up and are doing work for us, and we hope to be putting some of their things that they've transcribed up there soon, and we hope that you would consider joining us. It's not like you have to make a long-term commitment. You can try one and try some project and see what you think. So all the programs in this series have been recorded and are available on our YouTube channel, with the exception of tonight's program, which will be up there soon. Some, if not all, of the slides from the various programs will end up also being available on the volunteer page on our website. So lots of opportunities to kind of go back if you missed any of them. There's really, all 5 of the programs we've had so far, and I've seen a preview of tonight's program. All 6 programs just have fabulous material for being able to do lots of different research and transcription jobs. If you have questions during the program, please enter them in the chat. If you're not a frequent user of Zoom, you need to just probably click on the chat button, so a little chat area opens up on the side. Be better to do that initially so that when you have a question, you can just type it easily in there. Meg Baker, who's the assistant curator at the Hatfield Historical Museum, she will be managing the questions at the end. And then she'll also be talking to people about what are some of the opportunities and how you can sign up. If you didn't hear this before, just a reminder that we are recording this program. So we love to have people's faces on the screen. It makes it a little easier to present and see what the feedback is. Thank you so much. But if you're not up for that and don't want to have your face in a little black box, feel free to keep your camera off.
Kathy, should you ask people to mute for now so we don't get any background noise during the program?
Sure. Everybody should have your microphones off. So that's the little mic icon. If you click it so that it gets a line going through it. And I think I think Meg can also mute people if people can't figure that out. Right. So just in case there's background noise,
don't mute me.
Other people in the families, don't mute Liz. And then at the end, if people want to jump on and ask additional questions, then they can unmute themselves. So that's it for me. So now it's on to Bob Osley, who is president of the Hatfield Historical Society, and he's going to introduce our speaker.
Our speaker this evening is Liz Denny, Dr. Liz Denny. She's a community volunteer, retired business owner with 40 years of experience as a social researcher working with nonprofits. Through her work, Liz has developed strategies for finding hidden information online, and she'll also share some stories of sometimes overlooked non-digital sources and skills that you can use yourself to find information about your house or property. Liz moved to Hatfield about a year ago and recently joined the Hatfield Historical Society Board of Directors. She is a self-confessed high energy person and just a fun person when you get to know her. So without any delay, I'll turn it over to you, Liz.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone for coming. I should tell you that I moved here about 3 weeks before COVID hit and needed something to do. So I have a brand new house. I'm in Hatfield. And I thought, well, maybe I should figure out how old is this house and who lived here and so on. So that's where this whole thing came about. Let me just get I have a presentation here. I'm just see if I can get this up. Share. Does everybody see that? Blue screen with how to research your history.
Yes.
Looks good. Good. Excellent. All right. So what's interesting about the history of properties and homes and other physical structures? A lot of these things that I'll talk about tonight, you can use to research anything, a business that you're interested in, a building that's in your community that maybe you're interested in what used to be there, or your house. I'm going to focus on my house because that's what I did this on, but you can really ask a lot of different questions about things like who lived here before the property boundaries were laid out? When was my house built? That was a big question for me. I got a lot of different answers about that, and none of which ended up being true. And I found the answer, which is fabulous. Is there anything significant about the style or the layout of your house? Who lived here? Anybody interesting or famous? A lot of people are interested in that. My niece wanted to know that. What happened to the people who lived here before you did? And how has the property, the structure, the house, or the neighborhood changed over time? If you're into history, this is a perfect thing to do. I have to introduce you for a moment to my dog, who's huge. He joins a lot of meetings. He's usually quiet, but he is here, just so you know what that large white head is. Some things I won't be covering today. I'm not going to cover how to do title searches or research legal issues. If you want to have that kind of experience, you'll need to go to a lawyer or a title search company. They can do that for you, or you can learn how to do that. I'm also not particularly interested in nor versed in the complexities of language of deeds and mortgages and so on. I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like, but some of it is just not terribly interesting to me. Might be to you, and that's absolutely fine. The other thing I won't cover today is resources that I don't know about or I haven't personally investigated, which is fine. There are hundreds of different places that you can find information about your house or genealogy. And what I would love is if you suddenly say, oh, but wait, there's a perfect thing you can find something about, put it in the chat. Put it in the chat today. And when I pull this document together, I'll take those suggestions and put it as a last slide. So we'll have all of that. If you know something about my house that I don't know, for example, I would love to hear it. So that's basically what I want to cover. Here it is. This is 31 King Street in Hatfield. This is a picture that was taken about a month ago. I have to say that for me, for some people, there's a real goal oriented to this. You want to have a sort of an answer to a specific question. For me, I just like researching the history of the place. So I was faced with this, not much information about it, and I wanted to know why is it the way it is? And as with all of these things, it's a puzzle. You need a lot of time and you need to look at multiple sources. I've listed these 1 through 6. These are not necessarily in order. You can start anywhere on here and go through these things. This is the order that I happen to take, and it made some sense given this property, but I like to, whenever I'm doing anything like this, start with neighbors, and that includes anybody that you think of who might know something about your house. And then look at property and land records, and I'll go through where you can get those. Examine the structure, style, and location. Look at maps, and that is where Hatfield Historical Society shines because they have great old maps of Hatfield that are just delicious to look at. And I had a wonderful afternoon with Meg doing that. Looking at local history and looking at genealogy. And I am not going to go through a lot of genealogical resources because we've had some wonderful trainings about that already. And it's a whole art unto itself. I will give you, see, stop, go somewhere else and bark. You have to, I put in the most interesting things that I found so far about the owners of this house, and then you can go from there. But basically, I just would recommend that how far back do you want to go? To the beginning of time, to when this house was built? What's your interest there? How much time and energy do you have? I have a lot, and I had a lot of time with COVID. And what's your goal? Are you trying to figure out what the boundaries were versus the history versus it's a fun puzzle or a rabbit hole or all of these things? And what happens if you don't find anything? And that happens a lot. What do they call them? Dead ends. But with genealogy and with house research, you find out that there's just nothing there. Let me close the door. My apologies. Yeah. There we go. But better yet, what happens if you find everything? And I have found some wonderful things about this house that you would not believe. And it's just delicious. And the research is never completely done. You can't reinvent history. You can't have it play over again. So you have to be willing to just keep going at it. And new things are coming online all the time. So it's pretty fun. So first, talk to your neighbors. You're starting out with a house. You're in this building. Start with your neighbors, people who remember something about your property. And you know what? People love they love gossiping about their neighbors. They love it. So I take my dog for a walk during COVID and I start talking to people, and I got all kinds of wonderful information. I would start, if you have just moved to a house, for example, or you're just starting out, talk to the realtor who sold you the property, because they might have heard something, they might know something, they might have some paperwork that might be interesting. Talk to owners of abutting properties. Talk to neighbors who've lived in your city or town their whole lives, or whose parents or grandparents did or were born here. Talk to local history buffs. And of course, if you're doing anything in Hatfield, talk to the Hatfield Historical Society, because they're wonderful. You can go to your local public library, and often there are people there that are really interested in it. And then this is my favorite. There's a wonderful farm stand in Whately called 5J Creamy. And I happened to be sitting in the middle of summer, this summer, and was talking with some people there about Hatfield, and they had lived in Hatfield their whole life. And a man by the name of Dick Zagronic, please excuse me if I did not pronounce the name right. It's spelled a variety of different ways, and I'm not sure exactly how he said it. He starts talking about my house and telling me all these stories about my house, about 100% of which I thought was just, somebody who was wanting to chat during lunch. I didn't believe any of it, but I started to realize that he actually knew what he was talking about, because he had lived on the street as a child. And he was a wonderful resource. So a couple times in this discussion, you'll see where something he said now makes sense given the record. The problem with talking to neighbors is you have to confirm what you've heard, because people have all kinds of stories about things. Here's what neighbors have told me about 31 King Street. That the property was built as worker housing for abutting farms, that it has 3 bedrooms. That I know is not true, because we're still searching for the 3rd one. I don't know where it is. I have no idea. They say that other structures used to be on the property, that it's a converted horse barn, a tobacco shed, it's made of parts of other people's houses. That the land and or the house originally belonged to my family. So that's people on all 4 sides of my house have told me that it was their family's farm that owned this property. And that's probably true, because I'm not actually able to go back as far as I would like yet. So it might well be true that they all owned it at some point. Who knows? I have been told that the house was built in 1900, 1950, 1970, and 720. All of those are plausible dates. I have been told that it was a house of ill repute run by a single woman who lived with boarders. And that is a delicious story. That's the kind of thing I love to hear. I don't think it's true. I think I know what the answer to that particular issue is, but that's the best thing that I could have heard. I've heard a lot about a nasty occupant of this house who complained about the neighbor's chickens scratching her gardens. I think that's more recent. And I've heard about moonshine in the basement during Prohibition. So those are fantastic stories. I love gathering stories like that, but be careful, because it's all wonderful, but I think about half of it is magical thinking, and I've verified about 1/4 of it. So just keep it in your head that these stories you know, people have different stories about different things. It's not inaccurate. It just may not be completely true, is how I would put it. So the next step that I took, it's like, all right, now I've got all these stories. Let's go look at property and land records. These can tell you a description of the land, like the legal boundaries, the markers, who owned it. Grantors are the people, grantors and grantees are the people that sold to and that purchased from. Changes in boundaries, deed corrections, mortgages, loans, liens, lawsuits, that kind of thing. An eminent domain, like for example, King Street was repaired in the 60s and moved a little bit. So there's some documentation about that and gives me some information about it. All of that is fascinating. What I read these things for is the social history. Who was married to who? Was there a child? Was something being redeeded because a parent was giving it to a child? You know, what kinds of things were going on that you can find in there? And there's a ton of stuff in there. I should start, before we even get into that, a note about names. Spelling of names can be wildly consistent up to the present day, even within the same family. If you see Pocket and all these variations and Cottage, all these variations, I didn't make those up. That's in documents I have found related to this house just in the past year. So it really varies, especially if you're talking about immigrants, and especially if the language was not English that they're coming from. So whenever you look, especially digital, look broadly and use quote wildcard or sounds like options when you do a digital search. Make sure you do that because it could be anything. The other thing is that it's often easier to find people in old records than it is to find addresses or specific locations. The sort of thing that we all have now, which is house numbers on a street like 31 King Street, is a relatively, the numbering systems are relatively modern creation, didn't exist for all locations in the past. So you sometimes find it easier to find a family than the house that they're living in. And you have to keep in mind that you might have the family, but they might not physically be in the building that you're talking about. So you have to kind of work through that. And a note about 1900, at least around here, in the absence of a confirmed date, banks, lenders, assessors, realtors, and anyone else will look at a building, and if it looks old and they don't have a real date, they'll just say it was built around 1900. It doesn't matter if it was built in 1600, they'll still put built around 1900. So there are thousands of properties in Hampshire County, all of which are dated 1900, and that's why. And several realtors told me this, so I thought I would put it out there because that's led me astray in a couple of important ways. So in Hampshire County, I would have to say there's two resources that are pretty good for digital resources for land and property records. You can go to the city or town and go to the, or the county, wherever those records are located, and look up old deeds. But right now that's hard because there's COVID. And I don't know whether they're opened up again yet. They weren't for a long time. And I'm not actually willing to go there and sit there in a very tiny room with a lot of dusty old books and other people. I'm not willing to do that. So I've been relying more on the digital stuff, and there's some pretty good stuff. If you're looking outside of Massachusetts, many states have digitized property and land records, but not all do. And it sort of varies in quality and accessibility and so on. So you have to look around. But if you're doing anything around here, a lot of records are available through Mass Land Records. And see this green box down here? I put down here the different places where you can find things. So if you don't want to write this stuff down, no worries. I'll give them, Kathy, I'll give you this when we're done, and then you can post it and people can get this stuff. Mass Land Records has anything from 1920 to the present for Hampshire County. And I just learned from Deb that Family Search has deeds back to the 1600s, depending on location. And again, if it's not Massachusetts, you'll have to investigate what's really out there. And neither of these digital resources is perfect. You might also need to find something at the original repository, wherever that is. With Mass Land Records, you can do searches by the type of document, the name, the property address, the dates the documents were submitted and recorded. If you know the book and page that the city or town or county recorded it in, you can look it up for that. And you can download images. So it's pretty cool. Unfortunately, it's not terribly user-friendly, I would say, as a person who uses a lot of these kinds of things. It's a little obtuse. And you have to be willing to really search around. Look everywhere. I found documents relating to my house under these names: Bouchard, Kozak, under Burke, 31 King Street, North Street, Cowbridge, which is the little road that just kind of goes kitty corner off of North Street. Hatfield, deeds for abutting properties can be quite fruitful. You can find stuff that happened because if you're looking at the neighbors. And you can look at recorded land and registered land and plans, and all kinds of stuff is in here. And I discovered something new that I didn't know before, is that anytime there's a change in ownership, even if money doesn't transpire between the two parties, it's recorded. So for example, if a deed is, somebody's name changes and they want the name to be on the new deed to be accurate, they can record it and it'll come in with the new name. So you really have to search around. You can see this is kind of really wonderful. This is Nellie Bouchard. I'll talk to her about her in a minute. But it's got everything. It's got mortgages. She got a lot of mortgages from Smith Charities, which I have not contacted them yet, but I bet I could get some historical information from them. The earliest one that I could find for this property in Mass Land Records is from 1949, but there are references in those documents to much earlier stuff. So I would recommend start with what you have, look for references to previous ones, and go from there because they're often listed. If I'm going too fast, just yell. So the deed to our house, I have it, right? So it looks like this. This is why I say I'm not really going to talk about this, because it's impenetrable discussions about things. But start with that. If you don't have copies of your own deed, you can get it from your bank, or you can get the original from your city or town. Again, look for properties, names, and dates. Look at neighbors' things. It is free, not especially intuitive or user-friendly. You have to have Adobe Reader, which drives me crazy half the time. I can't get it to work. It's tricky to print or save copies, but you can do it if you're doing it. It's not complete. It does not have everything from the beginning of time in it, but it is a really good alternative during COVID-19. I had fun poking around in there and reading this stuff. And again, look for marriages, divorces, economic circumstances, people who went bankrupt, people whose house got taken because there was a road built in the middle of it. All of that stuff is interesting. Like I said, the earliest deed is for 31 King Street is from 1949, and it was for Nellie Bouchard, who received it from her parents, that's Cottage. I'm going to call it Cottage because that's my best estimate of what that name actually is. If somebody has a better idea, let me know. And basically they received it. The parents were allowed to live here for the rest of their lives. It says the previous owners were John and Mary Burke, which is right in here. This paragraph right here. And it gives me book 551, page 228. Ta-da! So I could go and poke around and find that one. And it was, the title was transferred to the Cottages in 1901. The other thing that's really interesting is that the Alexander and his wife Agnes couldn't read or write English, so they used a mark. And that shows up in some other places as well. So they were pretty recent immigrants. May not have spoken English when they got here. So that's a piece of history that's interesting. Now, Family Search has also, which I just discovered, thank you, Deb, has all of these things. Unfortunately, it's not keyword searchable. So you can't just poke in the name and have it spit out a list of documents for you. You kind of have to go in. It is free. Anybody can use it. Massachusetts is fairly well covered. It's a good resource if you, especially if you know the name and date. I have a name or a date or a book and a page. Again, start with what you have and work backwards. You can work backwards from stuff and expect rabbit holes, intrigue, hours spent only to find missing images, books that aren't found, and software glitches. All of that happens. And don't give up. Just sign in another day. Ask for help from somebody if you know somebody who's pretty good at it. Another option is Ancestry.com. They have stuff too, but you have to pay for it. I got around that by going to the library, public library, when we did not have COVID, for other projects that I've worked on. And they have, public libraries usually have subscriptions to that. And they have different information. They have a lot of the same stuff and they have different information. It can be worth it to do both. Although for the deed information, this is a better resource. And so I did find in here, you can see John Burke was the original owner of the house. And there's Alexander, I'm sorry. And then a bunch of other stuff. So John Burke I have a feeling from looking at this and some other stuff that I have, John Burke was more than one individual. There were a number of people. They're all in Hatfield, but there were a lot of John Burkes, and there was a son who was named John, and there was an uncle who was named John. So I don't know exactly which ones of these refer to this. And this has got an interesting thing, 1.5A King Street. I'm not sure what that is. We don't have anything that sounds like that now. And then we have 2A King Street right here for William. William was John's son. So that's interesting. Again, a rabbit hole I have not figured out, but you can go from there. So what I did after I got that is I like to put things in a timeline. I did this on here just because I did it, but I have a paper version of it. I like to stretch it out and see where do I know things and where do I not? And see the big question mark? That's a lot of sketchy stuff that I'm still working on. But I have it about think around 1870 that John and Mary Burke emigrated here and acquired the land that was here. The land was originally a little bigger. It had a couple of houses that now a couple of my neighbors live on, but it was like sort of a triangle. He was a farm worker. They raised a number of children. And then we get Joseph Pocket. I don't know how long Joseph Pocket was here. I think he was here when somebody wrote a history of Hatfield because his name is mentioned, but he doesn't appear to have owned the property, and there's no reference to him in any of the deeds. So I don't know what that means, but I think it was around 1890. I could find him in Hatfield. I found a family, Joseph Pocket, and he was also a farm worker, but I can't find much more about him. So that's a question. Then around 1900, the Kozashes arrived. They occupied the house around 1895 and eventually bought it from John and Mary Burke. Their daughter, Nellie Kozak Bouchard, was born here in 1906. They deeded the house in 1949, and she lived with them until her death in 1950 and 1953. And she stays there as a single divorced woman until her death. And at one point, some of the property was sold to abutters to pay for a mortgage that she had with the charities. Around 1975, Marie St. George and John Broudis buy the house. I don't know anything about them, other than the neighbor told me that they divorced. She stayed, and she lived in the house for close to 30 years. It was briefly owned by a young couple, and then we bought it. This is me. This is the only piece that I actually can guarantee you is true, because here I am. I'm in this house right now. So I know I own it. But if you lay it out like this, it's really helpful to just sort of see what's missing. Where do I need to go? So I started with the neighbors. I laid it out with the deeds and all the paperwork that I have for it and went from there. Then the next thing to do is to look at your house. Here I have this wonderful building. I don't know much about it. I was told it was 1950. So here's a ranch house built in 1950. And here's my house. So don't believe everything you hear. It's the dates of construction. Those dates of construction are not plausible given this structure. So what I have is a variety of foundation elements, flooring that is of every possible kind, lath and plaster walls and sheetrock, coffered ceilings, an afterthought of a bathroom, varied and entertaining electrical systems. The roof beams are logs complete with bark. They're square nails, modern nails. You can never tell anything about a house by the nails, by the way. I found out about that because they have been in various configurations since the beginning of time. So I don't know what it is. There is a chestnut beam all the way along one side, which I think is wonderful. There's shiplap in the kitchen that's consistent with it maybe being a barn at one point. It has a number of chimneys, and there's coal down there, which I think is wonderful. I left it there. There's mix and match doors, hardware, plumbing, additions, renovations, and oddities. That's my idea of heaven. A house that has like absolutely everything that you could possibly want in a house, all mashed together and no answers. So it's really kind of wonderful. So I know that. And I have rabbit holes of construction. So what's with the black paint under the eaves? And why did the painter, it desperately needed painting when I bought it, keep finding evidence of a black layer? What was that about? There's also amazing wallpaper. You know, if you like houses and you like properties, go investigate wallpaper. Wallpaper is fascinating. I put some little resources here and places you can go to poke around in there. But this stuff is sort of hand printed, and it was underneath the stairs with some, in a very odd place and carefully done. So I framed part of it, and I had to paint the rest because it smelled like something had died in there. But now it's clean, and I've got a frame with it. And we have chimneys to nowhere. This one doesn't exit the roof anymore, but it does go down into the basement. And then we have this. Can you see this outline here? That's my dog's dish. Sorry about that. See this thing? Why is there a trapdoor complete with hinges in the dining room floor? Like, what is that about? So then you go back to Dick, who I told you about at the beginning, that I talked to at the Creamy. He told me that Nellie Bouchard was his godmother. He lived down the street. And so when he was a kid, he used to come over here all the time. And this is why I started to believe him, because he started explaining things that he could not possibly have known, like this. Unless you've been in this house, you wouldn't know that was there. So I started to believe him. And I started to be able to say, well, maybe that was true. And he said that she wasn't that at all, but that people really got on her case because she painted the house black and she had a red light bulb that she stuck on the front porch. And we still have evidence of that. So I think maybe the fact that she was a single woman, single divorced woman living in this house, and she took in boarders. She had boarders, usually other farm workers, and you can see that in the census records. But she got a reputation from neighbors that were talking about her. Maybe she really was doing that, and that would be wonderful also. But the trapdoor was because during Prohibition, there was no way to get down into the basement except through this trapdoor. So they put a rug over it. This radiator was moved from another room much later. They put a rug over it, and then when they wanted to get down there to have a party, they used these holes. There's one here and then one over here to lift it up and go down in the basement. And you can see it from the basement too. So again, might not be true, but isn't that wonderful? I mean, I just think that's the best thing ever. And this is a good example of the flooring in this house. Varied and not consistent with the 1950s or 1970s ranch house at all. The other thing you can do is look for photographs. Photographs are wonderful. And here is where I have to say, thank you to the Hatfield Historical Society, because Meg sat me down with a big pile of photographs and says, look for your house. And it was there. I mean, can you believe it? I couldn't believe it. I expected to get nothing. These are the House brothers photographs, which Meg can tell you more about at another time, but there's a big collection of them. They were traveling photographers. This was taken in 1896, and there's the house. Look at that. I am so thrilled. So that means it had to have been 1896 is before 1900, is before 1950, is before 1970. So it gives me a rough time. It's before that. This part of the house has been changed several times, although there's still, like I said, in our kitchen, which is over here, boards that could have been from a barn. This was in the house papers that I got. And again, you can use the physical structure to date a photograph even. Let's see, it says Tyvek. Well, that's 80s. That's when that started to be used. So you can kind of look there. They did some work on it. This is the picture I took. Digital Commonwealth has wonderful pictures of all kinds of things. Sometimes you can find properties in there. Local newspapers can also be great if you can get to the Gazette's archives, or you get newspapers.com, which is not free, but if you know somebody who has it, or you can go to the library and use it. Sometimes you can find events that happened at a house and you can find information that way. And if your house has, I would say more of an important house, bigger houses that had some achievement in architecture, engineering, or landscape design, you can look in HAB's Historic American Building Survey, Historic American Engineering Record, or the Landscape Survey. Those are absolutely wonderful. They're in the Library of Congress, and there's absolutely no chance in heck that they would take a picture of my house and put it in there. Maybe they would, but they do have the Billings house in Hatfield. There are homes in Hatfield and HABs. And if you go and poke around in there, it's fantastic. They sometimes have history, sometimes they don't really, but they'll give like detailed drawings of what it looked like. They have pictures of what it looked like. It started in 1933, and I heard from them that it's still ongoing, although I don't know whether that's really true or not. But they have tons and tons and tons of houses. And again, it's got to be something that's fairly significant for it to appear in there, but worth going, because you never know. You never know. You might find it, or you might find out that your house was worker housing for one of these farms, and it might be documented in there. So it's worth going in there and looking. The other thing I like to do is just views of streets, neighborhoods, workplaces. People are worth looking at if you're interested in the history of places. So I've been poking around again because it's COVID and I'm bored. So I've been looking around at various sort of, can I find King Street? Can I find my street? Can I find Hatfield? And here's just some delicious ones. This is Main Street pre-1900. This is the one of the Kingsley photographs that Hatfield Historical Society has digitized, and they're just wonderful. There's a whole, if you go to this kingsleylastslides.weebly.com, you can poke through them, and they're wonderful. This is from this one down here is from a anniversary photo album from 1946, and it's the oldest Polish residence. And I like to think that maybe my Kozash parents are in this wonderful thing somewhere. There's still horses that farm horses that live down the street, so maybe they're descendants of that. So I like that. And this ferry, which you'll see later on, is important because it's right at the end of my street. So, you know, that's went right over to Hadley. So look for stuff like that. For me, it fills it out. What was going on at the times that these people were living there? And then we have maps, and maps are super helpful for dating a structure if the area you're looking at appears in multiple versions over time. And if your house doesn't appear on a map, that doesn't mean it wasn't there. Older maps tend to show important structures. Street names change over time. And if any of you are not from New England, you should know that in New England, the same street might have 100 different names depending on where you're standing. And it can change in a blink of an eye. So, for example, in Hatfield, the Elm Street, Main Street, River Road conundrum that I still have yet to master. I think when I've lived here 20 years, I'll know which is where. And again, house numbers are a relatively modern invention. In all of the stuff I've been looking at, the 31 King Street seems to have been something that was invented around 1980. It's referred to every other one as the house that's on the left at the top of the hill, that kind of language. So, Sanborn fire insurance maps were mainly if you're looking at businesses or commercial properties, but houses do show up in there, especially if they're crowded in with other things. They're from 1867 to the present. There's barns, businesses, factories, sprinkler systems, whatever. They were used to assist fire insurance agents in determining degrees of hazards associated with property. So you'll see wonderful things like leaves all of the chemicals out in the field. I mean, it's really pretty entertaining to look at them. As you can see, King Street is a non-thought. They didn't even, this is a section of one of these maps from 1915, and they don't even put anything on it. And there were definitely homes there. But I like this. The fire department had a one four-wheeled hose cart, something about the hose, and a 15-man volunteer company. That's delicious. And sometimes you can find out about a neighborhood by just reading these things. The Library of Congress has searchable digital repository. You can't always find it by address, but you can find it the same way that I was telling you about. You just can go through and look for it alphabetically. You can find it pretty easily. And then you get to the ones that the Hatfield Historical Society has. So they have a whole series of these wonderful old maps. This one is a plan of Hatfield. See that ferry right there? This is the ferry to Amherst. And then my street would have been right here. So in 1801, that King Street wasn't even there. This was referred to as Canada Road. And then, or sometimes County Road, depends on what you're looking at, but my street's not even there. So I know probably the house isn't there yet. This is in 1830. Again, this is King's Hill, which is a little sort of hill at the end of the street. And here's the ferry right here. But my street is just not really there yet. So the house was probably built after 1930. The best thing of all came though with this map. Meg put the yellow on there, but can you see this is King Street? This is my street. And this is Canada Road, which is North Street. And look at that, J. Burke, John Burke. And there's my little house in the configuration that it is now. And I'm like, yes, yes. So I feel confident saying that sometime between 1830 and 1873, but probably closer to 1873, given when that family arrived here, is when my house was built. And it makes sense in terms of what it looks like. It makes sense in terms of, you know, a lot of other information that I got, but I was just thrilled to find that. And a lot of these buildings are still here. These two are not here. They were changed. And then there's a couple other things on here, but this one is still here. This one is still here. These were not here anymore. Replaced by other things. But isn't that the coolest thing to find your house 1873 on a map at the Hatfield Historical Society? I was just thrilled to find that. And I should warn you that that's luck. You oftentimes do not find things so cleanly lining up for you. You have to keep looking and looking and looking, and you'll eventually find it, but it may be that your house was never on a map. And that's just why you would go to some other resources. Sometimes land surveys and plans will show, like this is the lot, this is sort of a map. It'll show plots and stuff, and sometimes there's interesting information in there. The thing that I think about all of these land surveys that have been done, this one was done in 1975, and then there was an earlier one in 69 for the town relating to improvements on King Street. But the thing that I think is so cool is if you look, nails set at base of gun barrel. Now that's amazing. And it's actually, I looked at the neighbors ones too. All of these little things were done with gun barrels. Why the heck were they using gun barrels? I think that's amazing. That's a rabbit hole I haven't answered yet, but I know there was a gun manufacturer in Hatfield for a while, but whether those were extras or why. And the other thing is, believe you me, I have searched for them. I have not found any, and I've looked on Wilma's lot as well. She let me look around and we haven't found any of them, so they may not be there anymore. But I love that that's the kind of detail that just makes my heart sing. Like, why was that? What were we doing that we needed to use that? A lot of people use rocks, and I have a fair number of the orange, the stick in the ground with the orange flag. There's a bit of that modern stuff in there too, but and you can also sometimes get cool stuff if you look at your property tax records. I don't know whether Hatfield would do this. I used to get it every year for free from Florence when I lived there. Not every community in the world has digitized records. Some do, some don't. You can get them from assessor's offices, although it's sometimes called a town collector or tax office. Some records have land or plot surveys. Many have basic dimensions. Ours happens to have this, which approximately sort of resembles what it looks like inside. And they also occasionally have photographs. So I got this wonderful photograph. I think it's before the Tyvek one because the steps are different. I don't know what this tent is. I don't know what that is, but the chimney to nowhere really was there at one point. Remember I told you about that? Because there it is right there. These are more modern windows than were there, but you could sometimes do it. And then here's a prime example of the 1900 problem. It's an old style building built around 1900. Well, they have no idea when it was built and they didn't do the research, so they don't know. But be aware of that. That's not a, don't, if you hear 1900, run, because it's probably not true. Another resource is local histories, and this is where you start getting into the more genealogical stuff. I found this with the help of Meg at the Historical Society. This was published in 1910. It says on the southerly side of King Street, the first house was the home of Joseph Pocket, who removed from Hatfield. I'm not sure whether that means he removed to Hatfield or moved away from Hatfield. It's not clear to me. It was long the home of John and Mary Burke and is now owned by Alex and Agnes Kozash. This book is here. It's in the Hatfield Public Library. You can go to archive.org, which is the best thing on the planet. Archive.org is so much fun. And I actually searched for my address in archive.org and looked at millions of volumes of whatever and found a couple things, which is pretty cool. You can search for people's names in archive.org. It's just books. A lot of historical societies digitize their books and put them up there. It's free and you can download stuff, not everything, but a lot of stuff you can download. This is the first page of this Wells and Wells, which is a trip. It is a fun book to read. It's got details ranging from facts to gossip. And I've loved it, but I love that my house was actually in there. And you can see this is the way this house is always described. It's the southerly side of King Street, the first house. So there's no street address. Another thing is MACRIS, or Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information System. If your house is in a historic district or vaguely related to a historic district, you might be able to find your house in here. You can get the city, town, or neighborhood the house was located in, who built it, or the name of the person associated with the structure if it's available, the year it was constructed, the architectural style. Not everything has been digitized. It's interesting. I really poked around in what MACRIS has for my property, and I found a lot more when I went to the Historical Society and looked at the folders that you have. So I don't know why that is. There may be something about MACRIS that I don't understand in terms of extracting stuff out of there, but it's definitely there. For here, we've got it called the Joseph Pocket House. Again, I don't think he ever lived there very long, but that's what it's been referred to. It's the address, and it has which ones of these, and it has nothing, no information other than that, really. But I was able to get this, and it gives, again, here we have another guess, circa 1880. It's an L-shaped cottage. whose simplicity typifies the period in Hatfield. It's a good example of a worker's cottage in the Upper Main Street district. I love these descriptions. There's a single-story wing. The main block of the house has a recessed porch, which has been glass enclosed and has one visible column behind the glass, which means the person was standing out on the street looking at it, because actually, if you get a little closer, you can see all of them. There are many across the front. So, but it's worth going. See if the local historical society has a folder with more stuff in it, because I was able to find more stuff. And then we get into genealogy. Again, I am not going to go through all of this, and I'm going to stop pretty soon, but these are all the different things you can look at. Tons of resources. You can listen to Deb's previous genealogical workshops. I mean, there's all kinds of things, but it can give you a sense of who's lived in your home and what their relationship to your town was. There's lots of resources. Here's some tidbits that I found that I think are really great. Alex, he referred to himself often as Alex. Cottage provided team and later relating to Hatfield's highways and bridges and Elm, Prospect, and Main Streets. So now when I drive down there, I know that somebody who lived in my house worked on the roads. And his son was employed as Hatfield's tree warden in 1936. I thought that was pretty cool. A clipping in about 1931 from a local newspaper shows Hatfield residents who owned cattle were interested in establishing a quarantine area and tuberculin tests of the herds in this town, and he had 3 cattle. I don't know where he was keeping them, but maybe on the land that was just down the street that's no longer on this property. And city directories can be super helpful. I was able to find him and his son, another son, and his daughter living on there. Again, the city directory still doesn't, this is 1923, still doesn't have any street numbers on it, but he was growing tobacco somewhere. He had 5 acres. I'm not sure. Again, I don't think it was right on this property, but maybe he was working on another farm, but he did pretty well for himself. I sort of was able to determine that whoever lived in this house, the farm workers who lived in this house were never really, quote, owned by or employed by a specific farm around here. They had their own sort of place here, which is kind of cool to think about. There were other farm workers who lived, there's farm worker housing right across the street from me that was owned by the farm, and they lived in the sort of more dormitory style, and that's not what this was. And then there's census records. And again, you can get them in Ancestry and Family Search. There's a whole art to finding this stuff. I copied a few out of here so that you could see. The census records for Hatfield and many small towns were not numbered, and sometimes they didn't even have the street. They just put the number of the dwelling houses numbered in the order of visitation. There are maps that say where these were located, although it's not always easy to find them, and I have not yet found them for this street, but there may be something. But you can still find the families. So there's Mary and John Burke. They're both born in Ireland. In the 1880 census, again, there's still nothing really here that's that useful, but he was still a farm laborer. Sometimes you get the date that I think it's a later one on the next page, you get the date that they emigrated. They came here like in 1891, 1892, although it's 1893 in the subsequent census. So it's sometime around then is when they got here. It's the Cottage family. See, the spelling has changed again. It's really unclear, but you can find it. And look, Peter Zagrodnik. That is Dick Zagrodnik's grandfather. He lived, that's why there's a connection to that family. And he didn't even know it until he and I started looking at this and realized that that's why he would even have known Nellie Bouchard, because his grandfather was living in this house. And I just think that's the best thing ever. And their borders, they had 2 borders. They continue to have borders for many years. Again, it looks like it may have been friends of the family and not a house of ill repute at all, but who knows, could have been. You'll see some interesting things here, like Alexander and his sons are all working out as farm laborers, and John is listed as a chauffeur, which is likely a driver for a tobacco farm. Another thing that's really great about Hatfield is that you have really good records for cemeteries in Hatfield. And I found the Cottage family. There's Alexander and Agnes who lived here. Here's Nellie, and this is Nellie's daughter who lived here for a while. So I went there and took this picture. That's just really cool that you have those records. They're in Find a Grave, which is a fantastic resource. If you're willing to poke around in there, It's just great. So, you know, it's just kind of neat to see that the people that were living here are still here. And the last thing I would say before I stop is don't stop with just whatever your house looks like. Look in your yard. So I was looking in my yard this fall and I found raking underneath a bush, Alice. And I realized quickly that this is a grave marker and not, you know, a sign or something else like that. It's a piece of marble that's about this big. And I immediately called Kathy at the Historical Society and said, what do I do now? Because if there's really a family buried there, that's important to know. And it's important to honor that and figure out what to do about it. And she said, oh, good heavens, call Joe LaValle, who's the Hatfield Cemetery Commission. And Joe found her. So this is my last part. It's like there's always a good story if you're going to do a house story. He found her. Alice was a little girl, Alice Boulter. She was 2 years and 3 months old. She died in 1863. Her parents came back. They moved to Amherst. Her parents came back in 1899 and gave her a better gravestone that was a little larger, also made out of marble, and it completely decayed. You can't read it anymore. There's a lump there and there's some town records about it. So Joe was absolutely dancing in the streets because he says, you found it, you found it. She's the only Alice that doesn't have her original grave marker. So of course, we have given it to the town. The town now has it, and he is going to do something to attach it to to fix it and attach it to the grave that's there now, which I just think is like, if I hadn't moved here and I hadn't been interested in this house and poking around and paying attention to the history, that would never have happened. So I will leave you on that note. I'm going to unshare this now, if I can figure out how to do it. Stop share. There we go. That's my presentation. Have fun with it too. The rabbit holes are part of the fun.
That's magnificent. Thank you so much. That was really, really wonderful. I really agree with you that the piece where you find the end bit and like all the ways that the story connect and Alice's story, just really, really fabulous. I have a little piece to share about the things that we have as options for research at the Historical Society. So I'm going to just see if I can.
Before we, Meg, can we just, so anyway, I'm guessing there weren't any questions in the chat.
There are no questions in the chat. I have recorded, I've copied the chat over into a document.
Great.
For Liz, because there were some
I just had
that
one question. You mentioned the gun barrels that were listed as being, demarking a property. So like, I don't know if Bob or anybody else has an idea about these, like, how would they even be, would they be laid out like end to end kind of thing, or gun barrels? Anyway, I'm just very, like, I'm fascinated by that.
Me too.
So anybody else here know anything about that?
They certainly could have been from the Shattuck gun factory in the old mill. I know growing up as a kid, a lot of my friends would find parts of guns that were thrown over the dam in the shallow water down below, and they'd pull up handguns. They made a unique little
we can't hear you.
Pistol. They made a unique pistol, which some people found in the water, and shotguns were their stock and trade. So if they had a faulty manufactured gun barrel that couldn't withstand exploding, they had to get rid of it. So a lot of these I could see may have been repurposed for boundary markers, or it could be rural legend for all we know too. They could have been.
It happens in the deeds, in the earliest deed that I could find around 1900. I haven't managed to get copies of the earlier ones yet. I'm going to look though and see if they're referred to there, because if it's around 1900, I bet it was, well, here's all these things. Let's just use these because it's convenient. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. If you need a big, sturdy metal stake at the corner of your property, and there's metal stakes that you can repurpose right there. Makes sense. Absolutely. And I wonder, you know, I've seen that around some of the properties here near where I live. So I'm, you know, very curious to know if this is urban legend or if this is actually a known thing in this region.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions? No? All right. I'm gonna, oh, go ahead, Rob. Let me unmute yourself, please. There you go.
Actually, it's more of a comment, and you mentioned you were talking about additional resources at the Historical Society. I was researching the house my wife and I used to live in, and Kathy put me in touch with the what is it? The Foxfire reports. Yeah, high school students did the research. Maybe you're going to mention that, but I wanted to say that, you know, it's a great source of information. You got to take it with a grain of salt, because after all, it is high school students doing it. But it referred me to resources that I could then use, you know, to check other things about the property. So it was very useful as a research tool.
That's a great point. I'll add that to the notes here.
Yeah, Meg, if you give me a copy of that, I'll just put it as, all of these are great ideas and comments. I'll just put it at the end of this presentation when I send it to you.
That's why I grabbed them, just for you and everybody else. All right. Are there any other questions before I get to the last couple slides of what, like, part of why that we're putting this program together? And this is our last program for our Digital Volunteers project, because this was wonderful, period, Liz. Thank you so much. But also, this is something that you've inspired, as the chat says, and as I say too, you've inspired people to do this more. And so we have some suggestions and starting points at the Historical Society. Are we ready for that? I think so. Okay. I'm going to see if I can share my screen effectively. But maybe. Oh, this is always the hard part. Just this. In the window. All right. You'd think it would be easier. Where is it? Okay, here we go.
This is always the trickiest part.
Isn't it? All right. How's that look, Kathy? Is that the starting points bit?
Yes, and so we're seeing
Okay,
your whole
good.
screen. So I don't know if there's a way to share it so that maybe if you click on the slide itself, so that we're not seeing, you know, all your menus and things.
Come on, do the thing.
I used to be able to do this.
There
and
we
I
go.
Never learned it.
Any second now.
Yep, this is loading.
Ta-da!
There we
All
go.
right.
Great.
So, and I hope my audio is all right. I will try to keep talking in an even way so that it contains, or it keeps going. We have several starting points for this sort of house research at the Historical Society. And the first place we would like to suggest, or one of the best options really, is the House Brothers images available on our Digital Commonwealth site. There's 78 glass slides, and most of these have a starting point of a street number, so that, as Liz said, that's often, you know, you go back in time and the street numbers are become nebulous, but these have at least been keyed to a street that you could begin on, and some dating material because of when the House Brothers were photographing in the area, so that we know that many of these shots were in fact circa 1900. So that's one great starting point. The next, come on. Next one is the Kingsley images, which Liz mentioned earlier. And again, these are homes and people and places in and around Hatfield, and there's 200 of these. And all of these contain a building, well, not all of them, but they can contain a building that we could find out more about and people that we might be able to learn more about. So those are up on our website, and we'll put a link to that below. When this goes up on YouTube, we'll make sure that all the links are available for people. Another great starting point is looking at the land use. We have a lot of fascinating topography in Hatfield between the ferry and the mountains and the tobacco fields and potato fields. So we have a lot of interesting land features that we could look at. One of the things that this map in particularly, and this is just from Google Maps, is 91 going through and how that changed things. So as we look at a future program and exhibit and project on farming, and especially farms that are passed down generationally, the impact of land use is interesting. Liz, you're dealt with 2 different immigrant families in your own home, from Ireland and from Poland. And so that's interesting to us. We would always love to have people find out more information about anybody coming to Hatfield. And then this one, I was like, what is your connection? All of you who've come here tonight to be part of this and to hear this wonderful program, something made you choose to spend your Thursday evening with us. And there's a lot of information just on this bit of map from the 1873 Beers Atlas of information of people and houses and places. And one thing I've come to really know about Hatfield is how many people have spent some time, or ancestors have spent some time here. So if you have a personal connection to Hatfield that you want to research, we'd love to know about it so that we can support that in what ways we might, and make sure that not everybody's researching the same house. The whole project is to support our digital volunteers, to have people all over the country be able to be involved in volunteering here. And as Liz has very amply said, the tracing the stories and families and houses is really, really fun. You can follow all kinds of clues, find out all kinds of neat new things. And so we really encourage you to join us in doing that. And I'll put the links below the video when they go up later. And I think there are a couple more questions, but I do need to show you the last slide here, which is to thank our wonderful supporters for making this program possible through Mass Humanities and the Cultural Council. And we really encourage you to be part of this digital program, digital volunteers program, and to join the Hatfield Historical Society if you haven't. And I'm gonna now turn it over to Deb for a second. You have a quick question. Did you unmute yourself, Deb?
Yes, yep. I just had a comment on masslandrecords.com. If you wanted to get to the earlier deeds, under the search criteria, you need to go to the option that's unindexed property search, and then put in the book and page number. You can get back to 1760 with digital.
Yeah, it's finding those book and page numbers. That's the tricky one for this house. But yeah, exactly. It's there. You just have to poke around.
So it's not like you said, that masslandrecords.com website is not intuitive at all. But if you look under that search criteria, you should be able to go back. Just during the presentation, I looked, there was a mortgage to a buildings on your property from 1864. So it's just kind of,
that one I know about. Yeah.
Interesting to go back, and that would be a way to capture a digital image if you couldn't get it elsewhere.
Yeah, it's cool.
There's, I think one of the things that Liz, you said very, very well, is that there's always more to learn and there's always more to find out. And I think, Deb, your point is very well taken in that, because there always is more. There's always something else to find.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're at time. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. It's 7:35, and I'm going to just check and see if there's any other questions in the comments. Peter Thomas, do you still have a question? Yes, go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go,
Yes,
Peter.
one of the things I'm I've been trying to figure out is whether anybody can point me to a document to where Poplar Springs is.
Is that in Hatfield?
Yes.
Where did you come across it?
What prompted it is, well, what prompted my thought immediately was the map you just showed actually has a spring circled sort of northeast of the town main street. And I think that's Poplar Spring, but I've been looking for a reference to it because it shows up in some of the early accounts, King Philip's War era or thereafter.
Mhm.
In some of the deeds it shows up?
No, I've been looking for it in the deeds. Still haven't found it, but there's a spring head. I don't know if I describe it well enough, but if you go to the north end of the street and then you head up towards Long Plain Road, you go up, I think, past the dump area, and then just about when you start turning to go due north up Long Plain, there's a spring, there's a gully there, but there was a big spring there.
Well, there's a stream on Depot Road that, cuts across the field from,
This
past
is
the
up
dump,
high,
you go
it's
up
on the-
Cronin Hill, you come to Depot and you have to go up Depot Road to get to Long Plain Road. And there's a stream that still cuts across there. Anyway, we can talk about this probably
All right, I
offline
just-
another
I'm
time,
just
Peter.
curious. Yeah, one of the other things I would say, I've just been dealing with House Brothers photographs. I just digitized about 250 of them. But one of the things that was kind of cool is on my scanner, you can change the density in terms of how dense you want to scan it. And when you put the photograph down on the scanner and then you hit preview, there's a little, you can get the box of what you want to do. Now, it doesn't like the big, if I'm doing a full photograph, doesn't like to go much above 1200. But I was curious about the people in those pictures. And so you can actually zero in on just the person
Mhm.
and shoot it at about a 320, 3200 density. And you get some really good results in terms of the photograph of the person that's standing in front of those houses.
Now we just need to know who those people were and where those houses were.
Yep.
But that's a good idea, Peter, because with being able to blow up some of the pictures of people, then if you're someone that can help date things, like Meg is pretty good at doing that, using clothing details, hairstyles, jewelry, the sorts of things you might be able to see if you really enlarge the photo, then that, might help to narrow down the year or, small group of years of when that was taken. And then could also perhaps with census records, et cetera, help you figure out who it is.
Well, I have a theory, for example, of since there were those two families and it was right around 1900 when the first immigrant family passed it off to the second, and that's when that photograph was taken. If it was a little larger and you could see a little better what the age of the person, the people in there, it might be the original Burke family. Can't be sure, but the ages of the people would correspond well with that transition. It might be worth looking at something was a little bit more. I didn't look at it for that because I didn't expect to find a photo in the first place and was thrilled about it. So I was just happy about that. But now I want to look at it again and see if we can figure out how old were those two.
All right.
Neat.
Cool.
There's always more.
Always more.
Always more. It's 7:45. No,
Yep.
7:40. And
So I just wanted to thank our presenter, Liz, for a fabulous
Thank you.
program, really educational and entertaining, and also to thank our funders again, Mass Humanities and funded by the Mass Cultural Council, and of course, just the Hatfield Historical Society, because Historical Society hosts this program and put it together, and we have to find the grants and get the grants and then administer the grants, and it's wonderful to have grantors, but and then just all the people who have donated to the Historical Society this past year. We want to thank all of you because you make projects like this and programs like this possible. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
good to see everyone, and thank you all of you who've stayed for hanging on so long. It's great to see people, great to see your voices, see your faces, and sometimes hear your voices. And we'll look forward to seeing you next year and next spring. We have 3, might end up being more, but at least 3 great programs that are going to be lined up for the spring for March, April, and May. So watch our Facebook page and our website and YouTube channel for more information.
Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great winter.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.